Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Political Excess. It's very early here, post-election day, so by the time you look at this video, things might have changed. But I wanted to get something out there for the early morning. I didn't get a lot of sleep. Did a live stream. A few people showed up. That's great. But what's the main takeaway so far from the midterms? Well, it was a good night for the Democrats, relatively speaking. Not across the board. There's definitely some bright spots for the Republicans, but the polls really seem to be inaccurate and all over the place. But overall, they probably did favor the Republicans a little bit more this time. But let me just hit up the highlights really quick. It's going to take a day or two to unpack everything and wait for the final results to come in. But right now in the Senate, for Pennsylvania, the Democrats flipped and picked that seat up there. John Fetterman, as of now, was able to win that, and it wasn't even super close. So it turns out Dr. Oz was really the bad candidate people thought he was from the very beginning. Up in New Hampshire, there's still some vote to count, keep that in mind, but Maggie Hassan is winning this by over 10 points. Polls were way off on that one, showing it kind of a close race in the end. In Ohio, J.D. Vance won as expected by a likely margin. Wasn't really close at all, but wasn't a complete landslide. North Carolina, Ted Budd won that as expected by a few points. Still a little bit of vote out there. In Georgia, this is probably going to a runoff. Raphael Warnock is ahead by about 1 point. So there's going to be a lot of chaos there for that December 6th runoff. But Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, he's leading by about a point. So he should be able to hold on to that. In Colorado, Michael Bennet won that by over 10 points. That turned out to be not close whatsoever. Mike Lee, he won that very comfortably as well. Still a lot of vote out there, but he's over 55% right now. In Arizona, still a lot of vote to come in still, but Mark Kelly is ahead right now. It all depends how much vote is remaining and where. There's a little bit too much speculation right now, so I don't want to go too far into it. And in Nevada, similar story. Adam Laxalt has a lead there. That would be a flip if Republicans can hold that lead. And up in Washington, still a lot of vote there, but Patty Murray, very comfortable lead there, way over 10 points. That turned out to not be close whatsoever. And I can scroll down here so you can take a look at these results. But this is pretty much what I said. The Democrats overperformed in some states, and in some other states, the Republicans did do better than expected, but that's not going to get a whole lot of attention. I think a lot of people had their maps scrambled yesterday. Pretty much every analyst in the middle was saying it's going to be a good night for Republicans, maybe a great night. Depending on how you look at it, it was a bad night for the Republicans or a rather mediocre night. A lot of these margins were close, not just for the Senate, but for the House and the governors, which we're going to get to. If Republicans did just 1 point better, they would have had a much better night. And down here, this has races that got more competitive. So these states, these trended toward the left. Some of these margins matter more than others. There's different dynamics in some of these races. The few here on the bottom, these races trended toward the right. These margins could change, but some interesting states there. Connecticut, 16 points to the right. Oregon, New York, 32 points to the right. And these races got less competitive. These states trended toward the right here. Not a big surprise on a lot of these states, but some of these margins, over 11 points in Indiana, that's a big deal. Vermont, Colorado, and New Hampshire, they trended toward the left by decent margins. Let's switch over here and take a look at the House. Plenty of races still have not been called, but Republicans haven't even officially won the House yet. It's kind of that bad of a night. Where everything comes in, they should be able to flip that by a few votes, but it's going to be another narrow majority for the U.S. House. Republicans lost a lot of these seats that were considered toss-ups. They didn't get anything in the Northeast, the 2nd District in Maine. Jared Golden is leading there. That's going to go to ranked choice voting, and Bruce Poliquin, he's not going to win that in the second round. New Hampshire really wasn't that close in the 1st District or the 2nd. In Rhode Island, 2nd, Seth Magaziner won that by a few points. Still a little bit of vote left, but Fung's not going to pull that out. Connecticut's 5th. Looks like the Democrats going to narrowly hold that. In New York was a decent spot so far for the Republicans in the House. They're actually leading in all these districts here on Long Island. A little bit upstate here in the 17th. Michael Lawler is actually still leading Sean Patrick Maloney. A little bit of vote left, but that's a surprise. In the 18th, Pat Ryan holds a less than 1 point lead over Colin Schmidt. And in the 19th, Mark Molinaro, he has a very small lead over Josh Riley. New Jersey 7th, Tom Keene, he does appear to have won that by a few points at least. Pennsylvania, not a great state for the Republicans. Matt Cartwright, he's holding on there. Susan Wild is ahead in the 7th over Lisa Scheller. Down in Virginia, That's an interesting story. In the second, Republicans did flip the second district by about 4 points. In the seventh, Abigail Spanberger held on by about 4 points herself. In the 10th district, Jennifer Wexton hung on by about 6 points. That's a much bluer district, but Hung Kao did not get blown out there. They skipped over Maryland. Right now, Neil Parrott is actually leading in that 6th district. That would be a pickup if that holds, but it could easily flip back to David Trone. North Carolina's 13th, Wiley Nickel. He defeated Bo Hines. That's a bit of a surprise right there. Let's go to Ohio, and this is probably where the Democrats overperformed the most. And it's going to give them a lot of inspiration because they probably thought Ohio was kind of trending out of reach for them. Here in the 13th district, Amelia Sykes beat Madison Jeziato. In the 1st district, Greg Landsman, he beat incumbent Steve Shabbat. And in the 9th district, Marcy Kaptur was able to hold on by a wide margin over J.R. Majewski. Republicans did win the state Supreme Court election there. They could have an effect on new redistricting maps. Let's quickly go up to Michigan. Republicans didn't get anything done there. In the 8th, Dan Kildee, he's winning. In the 7th, Alyssa Slotkin won. John Gibbs, he really did actually nothing there in Michigan's 3rd. Big margin there for Hillary Scholten. In Illinois' 17th, that horrible gerrymandered map, that saved the Democrats there. Looks like Esther Joy King is not going to be able to win that. She's trailing by a couple of points. In Wisconsin's 3rd, this, as expected, was a flip for the Republicans. Derek Van Orden knocks out Brad Pfaff by about a 4-point margin. In Minnesota's 2nd, Angie Craig, she defeated Tyler Kistner in that rematch there. It's not even that close of a margin. In Iowa's 3rd, that's a close race. But right now, Zach Nunn is slightly leading the incumbent Cindy Axne. That would be a pickup for the Republicans. Right next door here in Nebraska's 2nd, Don Bacon, he did win that by a few points. Not a surprise there. Down in Kansas's 3rd, though, Sharice Davids. Looks like she's going to win that by a huge margin. Let's cover Texas really quickly. Here in the 28th, Henry Cuellar held on by over a 10-point margin. Republicans did flip this 15th district. That was as expected. The 34th district, though, Vicente Gonzalez, he did hold on. I did anticipate him holding on. Some people said that might flip. I skipped over some of these southern states. Florida, though, that was a good night for the Republicans. We'll come back to that. Republicans did have some pickups there. How about New Mexico? That map was gerrymandered to protect all 3 Democrats. And right now, the Republican is trailing very narrowly. Up in Colorado, still some vote left, but even Lauren Boebert here, she's still trailing. In that new district in the 8th, the Democrat Yadira Caraveo is ahead there, slightly over Barb Kirkmeyer. Montana's 1st, still a lot of vote left, but Ryan Zinke, he's only ahead by a couple of points. Arizona's 2nd, Eli Crane, he does have a lead by a few points there. That would be a pickup for the Republicans. In the 6th district, still some vote there. That has to come in, but in Nevada, that was another map, gerrymandered to protect 3 Democrats. Right now, those Democrats do have small leads. It's a little bit too early to look at some of these western states as the vote is still not final there. We'll cover all the flips in a future video. Let's move on to the governors. Start on the West Coast. In Oregon, Dina Kotek, the Democrat, has a 1-point lead as of right now. I did think that would trend back toward the Democrat right at the end, but it's still a very close race. In Nevada, Joe Lombardo is actually leading Steve Sisolak. Got to wait for the rest of the vote to come in. Same thing in Arizona. Very close race. Katie Hobbs is leading Carrie Lake. But Carrie Lake has been gaining on the vote dumps that have been coming in. Got to wait to see how that pans out. In New Mexico, Michelle Luann Grisham, she appears to have won that by about 6 points. Texas, Greg Abbott, he won by a double-digit margin there. Oklahoma, that turned out to be not close at all. Kevin Stitt winning by double digits. Kansas, that's a close race, but as I suspected, Laura Kelly would be able to hold on, and right now she does have a lead. Minnesota, not really close. Tim Walz wins. In Wisconsin, Tony Evers, he won that by a few points. That's a big blow for the Republicans. Same thing in Michigan. Rachel Whitmer, she's opened up a decent lead there. Ohio, Mike DeWine wins. Huge. Pennsylvania turned out to not be a real substantial hidden Mastriano vote. Shapiro wins that by double digits. New York, this actually, again, was a reasonably bright spot for the Republicans, although they didn't flip it. They got it to close to a 5-point margin. These other races went pretty much as expected. Mills wins big in Maine. In Rhode Island, Dan McKee, that turned out to not be close whatsoever. Georgia, it really wasn't really that competitive. Brian Kemp, he did win that comfortably. And finally, down in Florida, that probably turned out to be the best spot for the Republicans. Ron DeSantis, he's winning by over 19 points. He did win Miami-Dade County. And last I checked, he actually won Palm Beach County. and he outperformed Marco Rubio. I didn't even mention Marco Rubio, but Rubio won really big as well, just under Ron DeSantis' margin. So we're still waiting on Alaska, of course, and the rest of the vote to come in some of these states. Let me switch back to the House, and I'm going to scroll through which of these House districts have had the greatest shifts, and I'll give you some of my closing thoughts. So this was a decent night for the Democrats, all things considered. Republicans underperformed, not in every state. They did fine in New York, and they did really well in Florida. We're not sure how well they've done in the western states yet. They're likely to take the House by a small margin. In the Senate, it's not a good night for them, unless they're able to actually come back and win in Arizona and actually hold that lead in Nevada. That would end up giving them the majority. There's also Georgia, the runoff there. That's going to be a big deal in a few weeks. Republicans really didn't get it done for governor's races. They didn't have really any of the flips they were hoping for. Nevada is probably going to be the only one they're going to get if that lead holds. Otherwise, it's narrow losses, low single digits in a few other states. So I'm not sure what the main takeaway is from these results. There's a lot of inconsistencies in this election, to be sure. Democrats will probably overplay their hand and say it was all abortion and defending democracy. I think there's a little bit of that. I think some of these Republican candidates were just not really all that spectacular. But this is definitely a shift from a year ago when Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia and Republicans almost flipped New Jersey's governor. And that was even before the economy bottomed out, so it's not all about the economy. The education issue was big back then. That was a strength for Republicans. Some of the COVID mandates, that helped Republicans. I think abortion did give Democrats an extra 2 to 3 points in a lot of these states. But Republicans are going to be pointing fingers as well. Was there too much Trump, or was there not enough Trump? Well, Ron DeSantis won with a massive, massive margin in Florida. He's most closely aligned with Donald Trump. So to say less Trump, that's not really going to pan out, especially if Kari Lake wins in Arizona. But then again, more Trump, that also does appear to be a detriment in a lot of these states as well. I think it mostly comes down to the individual candidates and how they're framing their races, and if they have extra baggage. I don't think there's one overall takeaway. I'm sure a lot of the pundits are going to try to say, oh, it's definitely this, or it's definitely not that. I think it's a lot of things, and it just goes to show you really cannot predict what's going to happen a lot of times. Sometimes things happen that aren't in the polls, that you don't expect, and there was a lot of that this midterm. Still got to get through these results, but 2024 is right around the corner now. That's going to be complete chaos, but we shall see what happens. Hope everybody enjoyed my midterm coverage. There's a lot more I could say on this, but I will leave it there for now. Let me know down below in the comments what are your thoughts about any of these races or the midterms overall. And if you enjoy this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.